For people that are only listening to this, can you talk about, like, you don't look white to me. You look like you're from some other descent.
Oh no.
And so I hope I didn't just like massively offend you, but I would like to know.
Micro.
Yeah, microaggression, right? So, what was your situation? How in the world did you get into the foster care system? Are you like, what was your life like as a child?
Yeah. So my mother, my birth mother, she was an immigrant from South Korea. Came to U.S. and shortly thereafter got addicted to drugs. Um, was unable to care for me. I never met my father. I don't know who he is. I have no memory of him. Um, but so basically from there, because my mother was unable to care for me, I spent the next few years living in foster homes in LA. And this is one reason why I'm interested in those kinds of things. So from there in foster homes, bouncing around, I lived in 7 different homes. I was eventually adopted.
Why so many homes?
So there are a lot of, several different reasons for why this is the case. One reason is because there's this concern that children will become attached to the foster parents. And if the child's birth parents come back into the picture, or the relatives come back, they don't want there to be any kind of custodial or emotional issue for the kid, right? So, for example, if the kid is taken from their home, placed into foster care, and lives with this foster family for 5 years, and then the mother or whatever comes back and says, "Okay, I'm ready to have my kid back," and the kid is like, "You know what, my mom, I'm living with this family now," right? Like 5 years, that's a lot of emotional investment built in. And so what the state does is just move the kid every few months so that they never develop an emotional attachment, right?
That seems like a special kind of bureaucratic torture of a child.
I agree, but I'm also not sure what the alternative would be. Because either way, right? Like it's going to be so because on the other hand, the kid could just live with one family, and then you run the risk of basically ripping them from their home and putting them in another environment. I actually don't know what's better. Well, one thing that would be better is for adults to just take responsibility and raise their kids, and basically do what they should do. But within the context of the foster care system, I'm not sure what's better here. But yeah, it was 7 different homes. Some of these homes had 8, 10 plus kids living in them. In LA in particular, the foster system is just a mess. And fortunately, I was adopted later by this sort of working class, lower middle class family. Neither one of my adoptive parents had gone to college or anything, but they were okay in terms of their financial situation. A couple of years later, they got divorced, and there was a sort of dispute about custody here because the adoption had not yet been finalized, and my adoptive father was angry at my mother for leaving him. So he basically just severed ties with me as a way to hurt her, because he figured, okay, if I stop talking to him, then it will basically hurt my ex-wife, his ex-wife. So, yeah, that was hard on me too, right? And so, I was basically like, what I was doing throughout all of this, I was a horrible kid, man. Like I was getting into so much trouble. I was like smoking cigarettes when I was 8, like smoking weed by the time I was 10, like drinking, like just getting into so much trouble, like arson, lighting fires, like breaking into cars, like just about as bad as you can get.
For the kid that is
So,
doing that experience, you're lighting fires or you're smoking cigarettes. Are you doing this because you're looking for a thrill, or are you doing this because you want people to notice you? Like, what's going on in your brain?
so I think there's both. It's hard to know for certain, right? Because like if you ask a 10-year-old kid, why are you doing this? They're just gonna tell you to F off, or like they're not really gonna know. Like they don't have the access to their own, inner thoughts that way. But in hindsight, plus like trying to figure out what's going on, I would say it's both. I think one is they're looking for attention. Kids who are sort of abandoned or neglected or mistreated, they just want any kind of attention they can get. from an adult. And, a quick way to get it is to just do something really stupid or potentially harmful. I think the other thing is, though, is that, like, for kids in those situations, they sort of lose contact with their sort of emotional regulatory systems. It just sort of becomes like wired incorrectly. They just don't have access to emotional affect anymore. And one way to seek to sort of try to reconnect with that or try to feel something is to basically do dangerous things, do stupid things. The other thing is, a third factor here is that they hang out with each other. So if you have a bunch of boys, all of their parents are sort of not paying attention to them, neglecting them or whatever, they hang out much more with each other, right? They just spend less time in home and more time with other boys. And when you have a bunch of boys hanging out, there's going to be this sort of spiraling of like daring each other to do more and more dumb things just to impress each other. Whereas boys who are living in more stable homes, they're probably just through the fact of how they're spending their time. It's not even about what they're prone to do. It's just if you spend more hours at home, your mom and dad aren't going to dare you to do something dumb. So you're just not going to get involved in that kind of behavior the way you are with boys. And then finally, I'll just say this. The sort of changing of different schools, different environments. So one thing with young males in particular is that we tend to like to have a sort of hierarchy, even if we are not necessarily aware of it. And when boys are introduced into a new group, fights are more likely to break out just because they want to know, what is this new kid made out of? Like, who is he? What is he capable of? And so on.
And that's every group of boys
more.
that ever gets together, right? Like you can't go in and be like, now boys, don't do this, because eventually somebody pushes somebody else. Like, they are going to figure out who the toughest kid there is. There's never going to be a doubt in a group of boys.
Right. If you just leave, 5 young boys in a room and just watch them from afar, there will be a sort of a sorting out of the pecking order, so to speak. And for poor kids who tend to change schools more often because of that unstable environment, those fights are just more prone to happen. Whereas for boys who go to the same school with the same group of kids, same friends, maybe early on there's something that happens, but then it gets established and that's it.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like these interviews, just go ahead and check out the full thing, and don't forget to subscribe to the VCP channel. Also, if you're interested in having conversations like these, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. You can find out more by going to network.articulate.ventures.